Welcome to A Slice with Dice, a place for honest conversations about the realities of education. I'm Corey Alderdice, Executive Director of the Arkansas School for Mathematics, Sciences, and the Arts. I've spent nearly 2 decades navigating the joys, challenges, and unexpected moments that come with leading schools. Each week, I'll share what works, what doesn't, and everything in between when it comes to igniting the full potential of our communities. I'm excited to share this journey with you, so let's get started. Today we're unpacking a topic that's capturing renewed national attention: the potential closure of the United States Department of Education. Now, if you're paying attention to the news, you might have seen the major announcement just made this week. The DOE announced substantial layoffs, cutting nearly half of its workforce, or about 1,300 positions. This move is part of broader efforts spearheaded by the recently created Department of Governmental Efficiency, also known as DOGE, to streamline federal agencies and potentially eliminate those seen as redundant or overly bureaucratic. But does downsizing actually mean the Department of Education could realistically close its doors altogether? And while significant layoffs might sound like a big step in that direction, the full closure of a cabinet-level department isn't as straightforward as it seems. In fact, it's an extraordinarily complex legal, financial, and logistical undertaking. And it's a quickly changing topic to boot. Just for context, this is the 4th iteration of the episode that I've already recorded this week. So to get a clear picture, I'll draw on insights from an excellent policy brief titled Understanding Federal Authority Over Education, published by Education Reform Now, which provides a clear breakdown of who holds the authority when it comes to federal education policy. I'll share a link to that in the episode notes. Okay, first, let's revisit why the Department of Education exists at all. It was established by Congress in 1979 through a law called the Department of Education Organization Act. This wasn't just an administrative convenience. Congress deliberately placed numerous education-related responsibilities under one agency. So to dismantle the department completely, Congress would have to pass new legislation explicitly repealing or restructuring those responsibilities. It's not something that the president alone can do through an executive order or administrative decision. Now, you might wonder, if that's the case, how can significant layoffs happen without direct congressional action? Well, there's a distinction between downsizing an agency administratively through layoffs, hiring freezes, or consolidating offices, and fully dismantling it legislatively. An administration can reduce staffing or streamline operations to become more efficient or smaller in size, but actually abolishing the DOE outright, meaning fully removing its statutory responsibilities, would require explicit congressional approval. This point matters greatly because the Department of Education manages programs like federal student aid, Title I funding for low-income schools, and the Individual with Disabilities Act, or IDEA. All of these programs are codified into federal law. If the department were to disappear, these essential programs wouldn't vanish. They would have to be relocated elsewhere, or the laws themselves rewritten or repealed entirely. Any of these steps would require explicit legislative action by Congress and a thorough, detailed restructuring of how these programs operate. Let's take federal student loans as an example. Currently, the Department of Education administers nearly $100 billion in federal student loan funds annually, plus billions more for Pell Grants, special education, and Title I funding for schools serving lower-income students. Each of these programs has specific statutory mandates about how they operate and who manages them. If Congress decided to close the department, well, they'd need to establish new legal frameworks to house these massive programs elsewhere, possibly in another agency like Treasury or Health and Human Services. And this isn't something that an executive order or even massive layoffs alone can accomplish. Another critical factor is funding. The department's responsibilities are deeply embedded in state and local education budgets. Schools rely on federal money for programs like Title I for high poverty schools, IDEA for special education services, and the Pell Grants for college financial aid. Moving or eliminating these programs would not only, again, require new legislation, but would also create a significant political challenge. States depend heavily on these federal funds, and any disruption, even temporary, could dramatically impact students, schools, and communities nationwide. Additionally, there's a human side to these layoffs that can't be ignored. With 1,300 fewer staff, there may be concerns about the Department of Education's ability to continue providing effective oversight and services. Education Secretary Linda McMahon noted the cuts are designed to increase efficiency by channeling more resources directly to students, educators, and schools rather than to administrative overhead. But critics argue these cuts might limit the agency's capacity to enforce civil rights protections or oversee complex federal programs like student loans and grants. In short, downsizing the department administratively does not automatically solve or even simplify the bigger policy questions of whether the agency itself could or should be completely eliminated. Moreover, beyond the logistical and practical issues, closing the Department of Education faces significant political hurdles. Education funding and policy directly touch nearly every community in America. Parents, educators, school administrators, state leaders, and students themselves all have a stake in federal education programs. Closing the department would ignite debates about equity, accountability, and the appropriate federal role in education. And navigating these debates successfully would require substantial political negotiation and broad bipartisan support, neither of which comes easily or quickly. Finally, if efforts to fully dismantle the department move forward legislatively, court challenges would likely and inevitably follow. Stakeholders such as states, advocacy groups, educators, and families would likely litigate decisions that dramatically alter funding, equity provisions, or civil rights enforcement. While the executive branch can restructure how an agency operates administratively, courts would closely examine any sweeping legislative changes to ensure they're consistent with constitutional and statutory obligations. So, in short, even dramatic administrative moves like the significant layoffs don't necessarily equate to closing a federal department. Yes, they signal a clear intention to reduce the federal government's role in education, but full closure remains another matter entirely, one tied deeply to the legislative process, funding structures, public opinion, and judicial oversight. While these recent developments certainly represent significant shifts at the Department of Education, fully closing it would still be a monumental undertaking. It would require navigating a complex legislative path, securing substantial political agreement, realigning funding structures, and addressing numerous practical challenges. If you're like me and would enjoy a deeper understanding of the authorities involved in these complex processes, I again encourage you to take a look at the Understanding Federal Authority Over Education Policy Brief, once again linked in the episode notes. It's a helpful resource for those looking to better grasp the complex interplay of power among Congress, the executive branch, and the courts when it comes to federal education policy. Whatever your perspective on this issue, one thing is clear. When it comes to closing the Department of Education, the reality is far, far more complex than the rhetoric. A Slice with Dice is a production of the Arkansas School for Mathematics, Sciences, and the Arts. I hope today's reflection sparked some thoughts for your own journey. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe, share, and leave a review. Let's keep learning and leading together. Until next time, keep striving for growth and excellence. Thanks for tuning in.